Hey, sports card fans, it's John, Wade Boggs fan. Hope you're all doing well. The question that Greg over at MidLife Sports Cards has asked everyone for this week is, what is your biggest hobby regret? Now, in the description of this video, I will have a link to Greg's recent video where he goes over all of your responses for his question from last week, and then he ends with the question he has for everyone for this week. Now, this question is fairly easy for me to answer. It is rare that I sell or trade any cards that I have acquired. I consider myself more of a hoarder than a collector. Once I have a card in my possession, it's really hard for me to part with it. However, shortly after my divorce from my first wife back in 2007, I had some credit card debt that I really wanted to try to knock down and eventually pay off as soon as possible. And at the time, my collection and collecting focus was mainly on Wade Boggs. But I had some vintage cards in my collection that I had for some time, picked up here and there from my local card shop, and thought, hey, it's not really fitting into my Wade Boggs collection, and maybe I can generate some money to pay down my credit card balance. So I submitted those cards to PSA. I was smart back then. I wasn't as smart when I had some of my recent vintage cards graded not too long ago through BVG, but that's another story. So I submitted them to PSA and sold them on eBay. Actually, I sold all of them but one, and I'm glad that one didn't sell, my 1957 Topps Frank Robinson rookie card. But there were some pretty big cards that, and some really nice grades for these cards that I had and ended up selling. And even though I really wasn't into vintage cards, as soon as I sold those cards, I got a decent amount of money for them. Nothing like they are worth today, though. And I'll tell you which cards here I sold, but I almost immediately regretted selling them. Yeah, it helped out a little bit. Didn't pay off the credit card balance. It paid it down some. I eventually did and would have paid off my credit card balance eventually if I hadn't sold those cards. So there was always a hint of regret in selling those cards, and especially once I started building my vintage collection, man, I wish I had those cards back. So here are some of the cards, not all of them. There's some smaller cards that I had in there as well that I sold, but here are some of the ones that I sold. A 1954 Topps Ted Williams number 250 in a PSA 6. A 1968 Topps Mickey Mantle in a PSA 7. A 52 Bowman Warren Spahn in a PSA 4. A 1965 Topps Joe Morgan rookie card in a PSA 7. A 1965 Topps Carl Yastrzemski in a PSA 8 off center. A 1959 Topps Yogi Berra in a PSA 5. A 1960 Topps Stan Musial in a PSA 6. A 1970 Topps Thurman Munson rookie card in a PSA 5. A 74 Topps Pete Rose in a PSA 7. A 77 Topps Nolan Ryan in a PSA 8. A 59 Topps Mickey Mantle 42nd home run card in a PSA 5. A 1968 Topps Johnny Bench rookie card in a PSA 5. And finally, a 1960 Topps Willie Mays in a PSA 6. I didn't go through and add up the total. I did a video on this maybe 2-3 years ago. I didn't go back and try to recalculate what I got for all of those cards, but needless to say, maybe a quarter of what they're worth today, given these grades. And like I said, I've tried to over time. I haven't made a conscious effort, but I looked back on my list and I've actually been able to reacquire most of these cards. I've reacquired the 54 Topps Ted Williams, the 52 Bowman Warren Spahn, the 65 Topps Joe Morgan rookie card, the 65 Topps Yaz, the 60 Topps Musial, the 70 Topps Munson, the 74 Topps Rose, the 77 Topps Ryan, and the 68 Topps Johnny Bench at now last year's National. So of those cards there, 4 more to pick up so I can finally have those cards back in my collection. But that is definitely probably my biggest hobby regret. Yeah, you can look back. Hindsight is 2020. Again, did I know back in 2007, 17 years ago, what those cards would be worth today? No. Did I sell them for probably what they were worth at the time? Yes. So back then I thought, oh, okay, I sold them for a decent amount based on what they currently were selling for. So if I recall, I think I was fairly happy with the results. Now, some of them I did check and they sold for dirt cheap, like less than $10 for like the Rose and the Munson and some of the others. I mean, it's like, wow. Anyway, yeah, I had no idea what they would be worth 17 years later. Have there been cards that I should have bought years ago that I passed on? Yeah. I can't remember any specific examples though. So this is the one that has always stuck in my mind, selling those cards back then. And fortunately, like I said, I've been able to reacquire most of them. And it's probably that experience that has prevented me from doing something similar. I have as I mentioned a lot, I have a small hobby budget. Now, I have some cards in my collection that don't fit Wade Boggs, don't even fit my vintage collection. I have some pretty decent insert cards that I've pulled from packs. Other, cards that, hey, if I wanted to take the time and sell, I could generate some funds and maybe buy a few big Wade Boggs cards or a few, decent size vintage cards and sort of self-fund my collection of where I'm focused right now. But I can't part with them. Like I said, I'm a hoarder, probably more than a collector. Fortunately, I have enough room for everything. Now, granted, right now, most of the stuff is stored in the basement, but once I get that finished, everything's going to be properly stored and displayed and all that stuff. But yeah, it's one of those things that I'm sure most of you have maybe a similar situation where you've sold something, either timed it wrong, like, oh man, I sold it too soon, or I wish I had would have sold it back then versus now, things like that. But for me, it's taking all those vintage cards that I thought were not part of my focus at the time, and they weren't, and to try to generate some funds to pay off some debt. And in the end, I ended up regretting it. So, Greg, as always, another excellent question that you have for everyone this week. And with that, that's all I have for you. So until next time, thanks for watching.